In 2020, I made my first horror game, and it sucked.
It's raw. It's fucking raw!
I released Cigar Break as part of 2020's haunted PS1 Wretched weekend jam. I irreversibly overwrote my project in the final 8 hours because version control is for losers. But I was defiant, not despondent, and knocked out this banger in less than 8 hours. 3 years later, I'm determined to return to Cigar Break with all my newfound knowledge and take it from being a piece of crap to at least a polished turd. First off, I need to address the lack of resolution options. Players who use an aspect ratio that wasn't 16:9 would have parts of the menu completely inaccessible, rendering the game unplayable. I wrote a script that creates an array out of every possible resolution, locks the frame rate to your monitor's refresh rate, and has a full screen toggle because some options are better than literally none. I originally used a free font I sourced from Google. It's okay, but these days I try to aim for accessibility, so I implemented Open Dyslexic. It looked a little goofy at first, but it began to grow on me. If it means even one disabled person can enjoy my game, then it was worth the effort. My advice to designers is to pick your battles. Some accessibility features just aren't worth dying on a hill over. I originally used Adventure Creator's built-in menu system, which is serviceable but intended for prototyping. Unity's UI is far more extensible and customizable. I made a new title screen that's properly centered, added my new options to the title, and fixed some issues with the way dialogue was handled. In the original game, all dialogue was on a timer, which was dumb with unvoiced dialogue. I have no way of knowing how quickly a player can read, but now the player has to click to advance dialogue. And who knows, by the time I finish this, I might voice the game anyway, as there's very little dialogue. The most fun part was redoing the graphics. Back in the day, I was ignorant on a proper graphical pipeline. Every texture was its own material, which isn't a big deal in a game this small, but for performance reasons you really want to atlas your textures. The fewer materials in a scene, the more performant it will be, and it's good practice to keep everything together as much as possible. But the visuals also had no cohesion. I sourced a lot of textures from images, poorly formatted everything, with no attention to texture size or texel density. I was totally in love with annoying visual effects, so I cranked the affine mapping as high as I could bear, which is just... why? Why did I think this looks good? This never looks good. In no video game, in no project, does this ridiculous, affine texture mapping look good. Every object was touched up to remove annoying n-gons and add extra polygons where necessary to avoid warping, while still maintaining a little bit of that PlayStation seams. I combined all the textures, touched them up a bit, and color crunched them for a bit more of that classic 32-bit look. It's not accurate, I never shoot for accuracy, but I try to aim for unity. Overall, the game looks far better with very little additional work. Lastly comes the boring bits, refactoring. Refactoring in programming means restructuring code to improve operation. While Cigar Break relies entirely on visual scripting, it's still coding by any definition, and there are many areas where I can improve. For example, I used to rely on a lot of useless variables, like an integer which counts every time you rake the leaves. Each leaf pile checks the integer and displays a bit of dialogue based on your progress. There are 3 leaf piles, meaning each pile checks if you already raked 0, 1, or 2 piles. You can see how this is a casserole of bad design. My solution? Enumerated types, or as Adventure Creator calls them, pop-up variables. An enum functions like a chapter in a book. Before I used to have a boolean that checks if you viewed the intro, a boolean that checked if you picked up the rake, and so on, but with a single enum, I can see the player viewed the intro, so now we move on to the next chapter, which triggers when you pick up the cigar, and so on. It's very useful for tracking a linear series of events, and it meant I could get rid of all these useless variables. Another thing I learned is the magic of parameters. In Adventure Creator, parameters are basically scriptable objects, which means they can use a single script to create multiple instances with their own unique values. With parameters, I can create a single script, set its parameters, and then I can make the parameters unique to the object that triggered it. For example, instead of copying and pasting a script 3 times across the 3 leaf piles, I can call a single script and change the parameters, like which pile of leaves to disable. Reusing scripts is the key to good coding, and if you want to design longer games, you better get in the habit of doing it. There are a few other things I'd like to add before I publish the Cigar Break remaster, but this is the bulk of the work. I'd like to implement Steamworks and a proper input system so I can play the game with a controller on the Steam Deck. I would also like to add voice acting and an achievement system, but this is down the road planning. My goal is to remaster all my Game Jam projects and release them as part of a commercial compilation. Something like a haunted box of home videos in the woods or something. Like and subscribe and ding that bell for more updates from this channel.